Good morning, friends.
Good morning.
And welcome to all of St. Peter's Church. It is a true pleasure to join with you this morning to honor this historic event that ended peacefully here in Salem, the city of peace, so long ago. The pews that you are seated in this morning are some of the most historic parts of St. Peter's Church. They have been sat in for nearly 3 centuries by both Tories and patriots alike. And the bell that hangs dormant 4 decks above your head, that will hopefully swing again before 2026, like it did for 145 years before 1885. Like these pews, has its origin in the 1730s, when Salem was a sea of Puritanism. And the very thought of having a church bell or Salem's first organ was anathema to the Puritan heart. Leave it to the Anglicans, founded by no other than Salem's own 1692 selectman, Philip English, to give the Puritans adjunct. Tomorrow at our bilingual Holy Eucharist at 10:30 in the morning, we will, in honor of Black History Month and our commitment to confess our parish's complicity with the American slave trade, read from the first record book of this church that includes an odd and sad entry. The last will and testament of our second rector, the Reverend William McGilchrist, buried out back, who, upon his death, manumitted his slave, Flora McGilchrist, and left her a few relics, including her own belongings. The church bells that will ring this morning at 10:30 are of a later generation, from 1885. But in fact, no church bells would have rung in late 1774 from this church for the occasion of Leslie's retreat, as we know it today. This was the Tory Church of Salem, the Church of England. And as another historic relic that I've laid out for you this morning will clearly show, we wholeheartedly prayed for His Majesty the King, George III, until at least late in 1774, when, like all Anglican churches in the New England colonies, St. Peter's was locked shut tight for several years during the war and was nearly destroyed, having more than 300 panes of glass broken by the populace in order to silence them. To my left, on this table, before the altar, lies the original Book of Common Prayer, a gift from the Speaker of the House of Commons that has in it the delicate process of praying for the King of England by hand, and instead written in hand across the page, for the Governor and thy councils of the states, which happened about 1782, I would reckon. But today our focus is to honor a delicate peace between 2 nearly warring parties, brethren really, whose political realities and desires have fundamentally changed. What a glory to behold that simple, fiery men, riled up by the events of their day, could still find it within themselves to keep the peace. May we have the same spirit and success in our own turbulent time. Welcome, my friends. A wholehearted welcome to you all. May God bless you each richly.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm Governor Kim Driscoll, for folks who don't know me, and it's such a pleasure. It's such a pleasure to be close to home, and I feel so fortunate to live in this amazing community. I want to thank Mayor Pangallo, Senator Lovely, Representative Cruz for joining us this morning. All of you for braving some cold weather to take into this amazing history. I do truly believe lucky to live here. And as you may know, last year in the Commonwealth, we kicked off the 2-year commemoration of the American Revolution, the founding of our country, by celebrating the 250th anniversary of the Boston Tea Party. So I've got this hat well worn. You should have at that celebration, America 250, the national organization celebrating the 250th anniversary of the American democracy, was in Massachusetts, along with leaders from other around the country and other states, to celebrate the nation's semi-quincentennial. Rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it? 250. So much of the formation of our country started right here in Massachusetts. It was terrific to hear Father Nathan talk about what happened right here in the place we sit today. We were the troublemakers who tossed tea in the harbor. If you think about it, these were everyday, average citizens, merchants and blacksmiths, farmers and laborers, who decided to stand up for a chance at self-governance. They were willing to risk life and limb in order to have a democratic form of government, to break free from the king, something that was unheard of at the time. There was no playbook, and taking on a monarchy with a well-organized military did not deter those who thought of self-governance, democracy, and individual freedom as their goal. And as a result, we're all standing here today, celebrating the legacy of bravery, democracy, leadership, and a revolutionary spirit that was born in Massachusetts and has not wavered since. But before all the battles of the revolution officially began, something incredible happened right here in Salem, Leslie's Retreat. It was here that Americans stood firmly against the British, avoiding conflict without sacrificing their sovereignty or their independence. Of course, the revolution would start in Lexington a few months later, but a lot can be learned from Leslie's Retreat, as Father Nathan pointed out. It's a lesson in negotiation and peaceful problem solving. This is what those citizen soldiers here in Salem did. They reached out to mutual compromise. And they did it while standing their ground and not surrendering their belief in their own sovereignty. The example they set has become integral to our Massachusetts identity. We know when to work together, and we know when to fight. And while the 250th anniversary is about revisiting our past legacy, for us, for those of us lucky enough to be in positions of leadership, it's also about carrying it into the future, into the next 250 years. I'm fortunate to help lead an administration whose intent is to carry on that legacy. Team Massachusetts, it's all about collaborating. Our strength is the belief that none of us are as smart as all of us. So whether it's through public-private partnerships, partnering with our cities and towns to make sure everyone has what they need, we know we're stronger when we collaborate. Today is just one small example of that. Salem received the Mass 250 grant to help showcase 250th, the anniversary of Leslie's Retreat. Glad to be joined here by our director of the Massachusetts Office of Tourism, Kate Fox. Kate Mott, I'm going to rename your name. It's just one example of the way we're trying to work across communities to celebrate unique individual history tied to America's 250th. And in current times, as much as we like to work as a team, we know that Massachusetts will have to stand strong, just like we did in 1775, and frankly throughout our 250 years. We will be the backstop and the beacon for this country. That means we're also standing our ground, fiercely protecting the rights of women and reproductive freedom, the right to a quality education, the rights and well-being of every individual, no matter their background, who they love, or how they identify. We celebrate diverse and welcoming communities in Massachusetts, and know this is a strength, not a weakness. So we'll protect our integrity, our freedom, and our peace. We know we can do it because we have before. By celebrating who we were, we are recommitting ourselves to who we are. And what happened here at Leslie's Retreat in Salem is part of that legacy and our can-do spirit. As we continue to celebrate America's 250th anniversary with events across our state, I hope you'll join us in celebrating our historic role in shaping our nation. Without us, there is no U.S. Let's remember that as we move forward into 1776 and 2026. Thank you so much for joining us. Senator Joan Lovely. got the memo from address the part. I want to say thank you, Mayor Pangallo, for the decision to speak today, and thank you to the City of Salem, in partnership with Salem 400, and the Leslie's Retreat SR Steering Committee for hosting today's commemoration. And I want to say thank you to Governor Lieutenant Governor Driscoll, Representative Cruz, and Mayor Pangallo for your leadership these centuries later, following the footsteps of our colonist leaders of 1775. Today, we remember the 250th anniversary of Leslie's Retreat, also called the Salem Gunpowder Raid or the Salem Resistance, which was the first armed resistance to British authority in the lead up to the American Revolution. Instead of this provocation leading to a violent conflict, however, ultimately, the incident resulted in a peaceful resolution to negotiation between the colonists and Leslie and his men, as the Lieutenant Governor had stated. Recalling the incident using eyewitness accounts, local historian Charles M. Endicott wrote in 1856 that, quote, "Thus on the soil from the inhabitants of Salem, the military arrogance of Great Britain received its first check in the fearful struggle just then commencing between her and her American colonies," end quote. This episode was an early example of grit and fortitude without the need for violence that the people of Salem will continue to show for centuries and will continue to show for centuries to come. Even amidst the growing tension between the British and the local colonists, the people of Salem were able to both stand their ground and continue their quest for freedom. And again, we look to the words of Endicott, who reflected, quote, "The first blow struck in the War of Independence had opened resistance to both the civil and military power of the mother country. Comparatively bloodless, it is true, but not less firm and decided," end quote. The ability to both stand your ground and maintain decorum is an important takeaway as we assess our own interactions with those we disagree with or even outright object to today. As we reflect on the city and the nation we are today, let us remember the assessment of that Endicott made of the people of Salem during this important moment, not just in the history of Salem, but in the history of the United States. Quote, "Fear was raised the first standard of liberty. The failure of this expedition should have convinced the ruling powers of the unconquerable spirit of the people and their resolution to defend, at whatever disparity of strength and at any hazard, their just rights and privileges. In defense of what they esteemed their inalienable rights, they felt themselves compelled as their last resource to make fair the arm of flesh against their oppressors. Contending with fearful odds, no dangers were too imminent for them to encounter, and no sacrifices, however great, to which they did not willingly submit." As we continue to commemorate the fight for American independence over the course of this year, let us remember that the revolutionary spirit guiding that fight began right here in Salem. Thank you. Representative Cruz, the podium for some remarks.
Good morning. That was pretty good for a Saturday morning. It is such a tremendous pleasure to be able to be with all of you today. I want to thank my esteemed colleagues, Lieutenant Governor Driscoll, Senator Lovely, Mayor Pangallo, Father Ives for his opening remarks. Today I'm joined by my beautiful family, my daughter Ivy, my son Ezra, and my loving wife Vanessa. And I wanted my children to be here today to witness this reenactment because as a proud son of Salem, I know that not only did we raise the standard of liberty back in 1775, but that we continue to be a community that stands up for our values. And as I reflect on the lessons of Leslie's Retreat, I certainly do agree that peace through strength and mediation, negotiation is certainly a lesson to be drawn. But I am more focused on the resistance that everyday colonists and patriots demonstrated in the face of an empire. As we think about a monarch who engaged in stripping the rights of residents, jailing their elected officials, and removing the most fundamental liberties from his subjects at a whim, the people that resided in Salem, our direct predecessors, rose up to save their neighbors, to protect their values, to appear in the face of an empire and say that we will not tolerate indignity, that an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. As I was going through the historical records of this particular time in history leading up to the retreat, the British had already jailed local elected officials and activists here, and 1,000 Minutemen and militia came together to force the British to release their neighbors. And that is a testament to the spirit of what makes this community of Salem 250 years later such a special place to live. And in particular, I'm struck by the bravery as we read the journals of so many of the individuals. But in particular, there's one voice that I'm so excited to be able to see brought forth today, which is the voice of Sarah Terry, a 30-year-old fiery nurse who got the last word in. And as a proud son of Salem, I know the importance of getting in the last word. And I imagine that in this particular moment, that some of those redcoats knew that they were on the verge of truly being defeated. As she yelled from her window, "Go home and tell your master that he has sent you on a fool's errand and broken the peace of our Sabbath." And one of those soldiers pointed a musket at Sarah, and if there's anything I know about nurses, they're tough as nails. And she said, "What? Do you think we were born in the woods to be frightened by owls? Fire if you have the courage, but I doubt it." That moment to me resonates so strongly because as I see today our young people, the people of the Commonwealth who often voice their opinions to me as their elected representatives, either through demonstrations, through letter writing, to try to perfect our union, it is the spirit of people like Sarah who are your everyday neighbor that is what makes Salem and our ancestors a place that we must continue to revere. So on my part, I take to heart that we're gathered here today to honor our history, but I know as a former National Park Service Ranger that if we do not learn the lessons from our past, channel the spirit of our ancestors and some of that ancestral courage in the face of tyranny, then we are doing a disservice to those who sacrificed so much for us to be the country that we are today. So I'm so excited to be with all of you today, to enjoy this reenactment, to be in community, and to keep that spirit of resistance that was focused on liberty and justice for all of us. Thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing you all there. I have the great pleasure of welcoming my friend, the Mayor of Salem, Dominick Pangallo.
I'm covering my voice, so apologies in advance. First, I want to thank Reverend Ives for making the space available. The staff from my office who organized the events, Jeremy Fisk and Jenny Cheryl, Diane Dunlap, the Legislative Retreat Steering Committee, Henry Rukowski, Rev 250, Jonathan Lane, Master 250, everybody who helped make this event possible today. Distinguished guests, residents of Salem, on behalf of the city, it's my great honor to welcome you to today's commemoration of the Salem spirit, the American spirit that defied tyranny and the arbitrary power of a king and stood fast for self-determination and for freedom. It's a spirit so finely reflected by the clear words of Salem's Richard Derby on that day, reported by some as, "Find the guns if you can, take them if you can, but they will not be surrendered." That attitude, not to acquiesce to tyranny in advance, to stand forward for what we know is right, to raise the bridge in defending the ideals of American democracy, as flawed as it might be at times, that defines this moment in our history, which defines our nation. Find the guns if you can. Confronted by an authoritarian oppressor, the people of Salem did not hand over their inherent inalienable power as free people. Take them if you can. In the face of threats of unjust apprehension and even violence, the people of Salem resisted the unjust and the violent, even when it came clad in the uniform of authority. They will not be surrendered. The bridge was raised. Salem is deeply proud of the role that our community has played in the establishment of this nation. And that's why I'm pleased to announce that later this spring, thanks to a generous and anonymous donor, we will be dedicating another memorial located at the corner of North Street and Line Street to the brave colonists who raised the bridge and stood firm in defiance of tyranny. We've long celebrated Salem's unique and important place in American history. In February 1875, then Mayor Henry Williams of Salem observed the following as the city marked the 100th anniversary of Leslie's retreat. Quote, "The deliberate, determined spirit of resistance on the part of our fathers forbade any further encroachment upon their rights as free men, and if need be, their lives would be given for their country. This was the first successful effort to throw off the yoke that could no longer be borne. The 26th of February, 1775, was the dawning of freedom on this continent. The day star of liberty had already risen, and an independent people stood before the world." End quote. Freedom, of course, existed on this continent for the indigenous inhabitants of these lands long before February 26, 1775. And the glow of liberty that Mayor Williams spoke of did not shine upon all this land equitably after that date. We must be reflective of the fact that the much vaunted freedom for which the people of Salem, and ultimately so many other places across our Commonwealth and our colonies, stood up for was an incomplete freedom. But the work of our nation would be, for generations, the completion of that struggle, to form a more perfect union. And as imperfect as it was, in 1775, at the end of a British bayonet, bakers and blacksmiths arrayed against 300 trained soldiers, it was an idea and an ideal whose outcome was far from certain. The journey to shape that more perfect union required a first step, faltering perhaps, but forward. That cold Sunday in 1775, the people of Salem took that step, at the risk of their lives, their livelihood, and their legacy. They saw with clarity and resolve what was marching down that road from Holman's Cove to Margaret. They saw it and they did the only thing they knew they could do. They acted as Americans, and they raised the bridge. Thank you for joining us this morning. And please join me as we journey back now to 1775, as Colonel Leslie has just received his orders from General Page.
Intelligence. February 24, 1775. Gun carriages making at Salem. 12 pieces of brass cannon mounted are at Salem Lodge near the North River on the back of the town. There are 8 field pieces in an old store or barn near the landing place at Salem. They're to be moved in a few days. Seizure of them would greatly disconcert their schemes. So writes our knowledgeable friend. We have more friends than the rebels know. Some among the families loyal to the government, whom their neighbors know as Tories. Others are hidden among the rebels themselves, even on their own committee of safety. Sometimes their intelligence bears good fruit, as it did in Cambridge when we seized the gunpowder last fall. More recently, our operations have been more frustrating, as when the rebels outfoxed us in Portsmouth. But as for this intelligence, General Gage has little doubt of its accuracy. Its source is among the best we have. The General formed some light acquaintance with the towns of Danvers and Salem last autumn, as did I. And I have no doubt that old acquaintances are responsible for this interesting accumulation of guns. Our friend on the Rebels Committee of Safety informs us that a craftsman named David Mason, lately of Boston's Militia Artillery Company, has been gathering munitions, traveling up and down the country for some time, even importing them from abroad. I encountered Mason and his cronies this last summer. He knows what he's about. The committee has chosen wisely. And the rebels cannot deny that if they are gathering field pieces and mounting them on carriages, then they are preparing for insurrection. I ask you, what need does a petty local militia have for cannon? General Gage has ordered me to Salem with a small detachment of my men to take care of this situation, swiftly and cleanly. HMS Lively will carry us up to Marblehead tomorrow evening. We'll need to sail through the night to arrive early enough in the day, and the men will be ordered below decks to prevent discovery. We'll land in the morning while the inhabitants are in church, the better to take the country unawares. If the guns are indeed mounted, they can be seized. If not, they must be spiked. General Gage is a temperate man, and that's why he's here, to put a lid on this simmering cauldron of discontent. He wishes the rule of law to be observed, and I know my duty. No one wants another bloody massacre on the streets of some provincial town. Order and the king's peace must be maintained.
Be along shortly. I know no business is on Saturday, but what did you want to talk to Susanna about?
Nothing.
Susanna?
It's a secret. A secret we saw yesterday down by the river.
What kind of secret?
It's what Father and his friends are hiding. We saw it. We counted 17 of them.
Yes, there are a lot of cannons. Look, the great guns that you saw, the cannon. You cannot talk about those to anyone. Not to the neighbors, not to Sam Gray. It's best not even to talk about them at home. This has to be another one of our secrets.
Like the cottages we're making at home and the time Father got chased out of Boston by the soldiers using them in secret?
Yes. Do you remember the story of Rahab and the spies in the Bible?
Yes. She was the woman in Jericho who had to help Joshua hide the spies so they could bring the Bible.
Yes, very good. There is all kinds of courage, Suki, especially at times like this. Not all of us get to fight on a battlefield. Some of us have to fight by keeping secrets. Do you understand?
Yes, and what did the king's men think we were traitors?
No doubt the king's ministers and the men in Parliament would. But we know that we are true patriots, Susanna. Massachusetts is our country, and we are loyal to her. We remember who we are.
I promise I won't tell.
Good girl. Run along and find our key while I talk to Captain Felt.
Yes, Mama.
You can talk to Sam, just talk about skating.
Good morning, Mrs. Mason. Good Sabbath day to you. I trust you and Miss Susanna are well.
Good day, Captain Felt. I must say I've had better mornings. It seems that young Suki and young Mr. Gray stumbled upon a store of secrets down by the river yesterday.
Lord have mercy.
Indeed. She said that she saw 17 cannon.
Yes, it's quite a store. Mostly iron, and mostly guns from the last war with the French.
I am not sure how many more of this province's secrets I can force upon my children's shoulders. As I recall, 4 brass field pieces were stolen from under the noses of the British Army in Boston last fall. I have not asked my husband if he knows where they are. Nor will I. I cannot tell what I do not know.
A wise course of action. In terms of the British protections, they wish to seize our weapons, and they have every right to do so, but they shall not take our weapons or our power. It is only because of our great intelligence and our express riders that we outwitted them in Portsmouth.
And it was wise of our friends in Rhode Island and in New London to secure their supplies. It seems that at least we learned something from what happened in Cambridge last fall. And, of course, if anyone were to ask, children have such vivid imaginations. But I do hope that Susanna's discovery will be moved, and soon,
Indeed, you can count upon that.
to an inland location, I would hope.
That would be ideal.
Perhaps the seat of a neighboring county.
Let us hope and pray, Mrs. Mason.
Amen.
Good morning, brethren. Good morning. We shall begin our worship this Sabbath with a hymn that is known to many of you. But if you do not know the words or the music, you can find it in your pews, in the blue hymnal. Number 377, the old 100. We shall sing the first verse. 377. Please rise as able. Let us worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness. All people that on earth do dwell, sing to the Lord with cheerful voice. Insert with mirth his praise foretell. Come ye before him and rejoice. Amen. My brothers and sisters, it does not escape me today that while we raise our voices to the Lord with songs of praise, few among us feel inspired to rejoice. The times in which we live are not rich in the blessings of peace and joy. Instead, we find ourselves in a time of division between neighbors, a time of enmity, such as none among us can remember. To our grief, father is divided from son, brother against brother. And friendships fall prey to quarrels of state. Many feel that they have cause to join with the psalmist when he cries in our text for today, "Destroy, O Lord, and divide their tongues, for I have seen violence and strife in the city. Day and night they go about it upon the walls thereof. Mischief also and sorrow are in the midst of it. Wickedness is in the midst thereof. Deceit and guile depart not from her streets." Even for those who have not experienced the grief of division within their families and amongst their friends, and I think there are few who have been so fortunate, cannot escape the truth that we live in uncertain times, in a time of testing, such as our fathers were not compelled to face. Conflict with a foreign enemy is a unifying force, but in our present age, we face not an external foe, but rather a rending of the empire itself, a disagreement at the core of our Constitution and our relationship with the mother country. Indeed, it seems that it is not to the experience of our fathers and grandfathers to whom we may look for understanding in this time of sorrow, but to the generations who came before them, who lived through the civil wars of the last century. Those who arrived here from Britain in the ancient beginning built our churches here, as their brothers at home in the mother country were fighting a tyrannical king. And some of them returned to aid in their brief experiment in building an English republic. Others will recall how in the days when our British brethren were engaged in the overthrow of yet another tyrant, the men of Massachusetts deposed that wicked royal governor Andros and sought to negotiate a new charter for our province under the authority of our own emissaries. Now, these comparisons may fire pride in our hearts, and rightly so. We have cause to be proud of the deeds of our forefathers in resisting absolute monarchy and the tyrants and the tyrannies that attend unrighteous forms of government. However, these comparisons are of the gravest kind. They must give us pause. It may be that few times in the history of the English nation were as bloody and full of grief as those of the last century, which led to the overthrow of Charles I. And while our most recent revolution is often termed bloodless, it was not without its battles. In such times, bloodshed may seem inevitable. The presence of a regular army of occupation on our shores, and the drilling of our own militias in the streets and on our town common speak to preparation, perhaps horrible to say, a desire for blood to be shed, for the argument to move from our newspapers to our streets, to our taverns, our homes, to the field of open battle. But we must consider that in the event of an open war, that field of battle will be our streets, our taverns, our homes, our fields. It is upon the shoulders of each of us that the choice rests, whether to shed blood or to forbear, to forge peace with our neighbor, or to stoke the fires of violence. I would remind you of the words of our Lord at the Last Supper, when he said, "Peace I leave with you, my own peace I give unto you. Not as the world giveth, give I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. You have heard how I said unto you, I go away and come again unto you. If ye love me, ye will rejoice, because I